Hey everybody, thank you for checking out my channel. I got another story for you today. Talk to you a little bit about my experience working with Tony Robbins and how I met him and how I led to that. So I want to tell you to hit the subscribe button. Please leave me a comment and my cash app's below if you want to help me out. All right, so I think the last story I was telling you, I was basically talking about going through college, finishing college, starting off with my first scam where I initially got caught. This is when I was living in Texas. I was working for West Telemarketing when I was in Texas. I ended up taking a bunch of people's credit and information that I had gotten while I was working at West Telemarketing for the AT&T Universal card, calling people up on the phone. But after I did that, I probably made over $100,000. I had a ton of money. I had a house, cars, bunch of money in the bank. I just finished college, graduated. So I wanted to kind of move up. And as I mentioned, I'd never gotten caught for anything. I'd never been in trouble except for the trespassing at a McDonald's one time when I got into an argument with a manager and threw a drink on him. So while I was in Texas working, I've always been big on motivational speakers and on cognitive thinking techniques that help you elevate to a higher level. Read a lot of books on it. Definitely read books by Tony Robbins. Did his course called Personal Power. Did a course called Landmark Education on getting to know yourself a little bit better. So what ended up happening to me while I was in Texas, I went back to work for the Pollock Paper Company, or I was working with the paper company and West Telemarketing. Well, while at the paper company, they offered me a job as a sales rep, not just a customer service rep inside, but they offered me a job as a sales rep working outside, going place to place, actually talking to the customer, meeting them in person. But they offered that job in their newly opened facility in Atlanta, Georgia. So they gave me money to uproot and move to Atlanta. Now, as I mentioned before, going to school and working all those jobs, when I started stealing credit and using other people's credit cards to make money, I stopped working multiple jobs and just ended up either working at West or working at Pollock. It depends, because I think all this took place over the course of 2 years that I was taking people's money and I had money stacked up. So I just worked one normal job after I graduated, which was Pollock Paper. But while I was working, I also teamed up with this band called The Grooves. Dave's on the drum. I did a little keyboard and vocalist. We kind of did a bunch of cover music for different places in Austin, Texas, moving around. Because when I had the money, I actually moved from San Antonio to a house in Austin to go to school. And I ended up meeting up with this band, meeting them one night at a club, dancing and loving their music. And the keyboardist was leaving, and I took a few piano lessons when I was a kid. So he helped me get tuned up with his Moog, and I would like perform and dance with him. Because I had so much money in the bank, I was able to enhance the band. I bought a new upgraded Moog, a bass guitar, a cordless microphone. We had a blast. I just upgraded us to a different level. So we started moving around. I actually got a chance to go on a cruise one summer and play on a cruise ship, which is, if this wasn't basically about crime, I might go through that whole spectacle, because being a band on a cruise ship is on next level when it comes to doing anything. But just everything, enjoying that life. So what happened was, when I got the opportunity to get the job at Pollock, it was going to be making me about $45,000, $50,000 a year, more money than I ever known about in my life. So I moved from Austin, Texas to Atlanta, Georgia. Now, when I moved, as I mentioned, since I was doing scams, I had a ton of money. So even though I was living in Atlanta, I was able to fly back to Austin like every weekend wherever we had a gig. So, I mean, there was somebody there to replace me, but because I had so much money in the bank, I would just fly back and forth. And instead of being the four-man band, when the guy that replaced me Mark was his name, then when I show up, we'd be 5 members and play. Because I could just go because I could. I didn't even want part of the money that they were paid for performing. I would just show up just to get down and hang out. Being in a band is awesome because there's a lot of women, a lot of drinking, a lot of partying. So it was great. So I would fly back and just go and see them every other weekend. Now I did this for about 7 months, booking my ticket on Delta every time because Delta has a hub out of Atlanta and they have a direct flight right to Austin. So I would be on that same flight on Friday, and then I would return Sunday night to go to work Monday morning. Or I'd return Monday morning to go to work Monday morning. And enjoying it. I flew so much, right? And I got frequent flyer miles. I was keeping track. I had joined the Air Miles Club that they sent me a card in the mail that told me I was a gold member and gave me little vouchers that would allow me to upgrade my ticket from coach to first class. I'll never forget that. I said, oh my God, I can fly first class? The first time I flew first class, I'm like, this is where I belong. All of this was just solidifying my scamming. So to keep going, obviously before I left West Telemarketing, as I mentioned before, we would record every confirmation of an application we did for the AT&T Universal Card, which is where I got the information for people with good credit. I worked in the training department, and quality improvement was a department that kept the tapes. When I was training, I'd go to quality improvement and say, hey, make me a copy of about 4 tapes so I can have my training class listen to it. These were cards that other workers gave away that had people's personal information on them. So when I finally quit, I had about 10 tapes with over 100 people with great credit information. I sat and listened to it a couple of times, and I remember the first round, I just picked out the people that had above $30,000 cards. Like I said, I'll pick them out, and then I'll go back and pick out the people that had between 20 and 30. I picked the 30 plus first. But then I said, next time I go through it, I'll go back and get the people between 20 and 30. Just doing that and taking their identities and getting cards in their name sent to my house, wherever I was, and cashing the convenience checks, what had me thinking that this was going to be the life I live forever. Especially since now I got a job making $50,000 a year. I can actually start doing the people at much longer intervals than like every month. Because when I first started doing it, I had one guy's, Freddie's, for about 6 to 8 months. His $25,000 lasted me about 6 months because I didn't know how to spend money then. After a while, about a year later, I started needing one person or one card at 50, 60,000 every 2 or 3 months. Because now I know how to spend money. I need to go on cruises. I need to visit home, rent a car, buy a house. I just started spending more money as I had more access to it. So while living in Atlanta and flying back and forth to Austin just to hang out with a band, because I had that kind of money, I was able to upgrade to first class. So I sit in first class eating my smoked salmon and crackers from a cutlery board and drinking wine or a drink, flying back and forth. One day I sat next to this gentleman that worked for Plus, which is a company that's based out of the French Riviera. He was their Southeast United States salesman based out of Atlanta. When I sat next to him, he was telling me how he travels everywhere for the company. He has an office in Atlanta, but he said he makes about $180,000 a year. So I'm like, oh my God, 180? Are they hiring? He's like, nah, this is a unique job. There's only like 4 of us for the United States. They divided the United States up into 4 sections. He said, if something happens, I'll let you know. Now, as I mentioned, I was a huge fan of Tony Robbins because I did one of his courses. And I wanted to go to a course that he was having in Atlanta. But when I called them and asked them about the course, it was a weekend course. It was supposed to be an introduction Friday night. It was an all-day seminar Saturday and a celebration or a closing ceremony on Sunday. I think Saturday is like 10 hours. those 14 hours would run you about $5,600. So when I called them up and I asked them to go to Tony Robbins seminar and they said it was $5,600, I'm like, listen, I'm stealing money and that's too much for me to pay. Don't be ridiculous, but I'm out of there. So I'm like, I'm not gonna go to that. So when I met this gentleman on the plane, he told me that he met the boss of his job at an Anthony Robbins seminar. I said, are you serious? He goes, yeah, how do you think I got the job? I said, I was gonna go to that seminar, but when I called them, they quoted me $5,600. I'm like, $5,600 for a weekend is ridiculous. He said, you damn right it's ridiculous. It's way too much money. He said, but before you deny yourself going, he says, ask yourself one question. He said, that event is damn near sold out and it will be sold out. Ask yourself, who will pay $5,600 to go, right? A question that I never even thought about asking myself. So when I asked myself that question, I said, very, very rich people. He said, or very motivated people for success, or the boss, my boss, who gave me $180,000 a year job. He says the opportunities to rub elbows with an echelon that you would never dream you would ever be able to rub elbows with is what'll happen if you take that seminar and pay $5,600, because you're there with people that have the same ambitions of having a more fulfilled or destined life, I think that was the name of the seminar, than you ever will in your life without taking it. At that moment in time, that man has no idea, but he sold me. Like at that point, I'm like, okay, as soon as I land, this is before cell phones, of course, as soon as I land and I get to my hotel in Austin, I'm calling and I'm booking myself in the Tony Robbins seminar, which I did. Best thing I ever done in my life. So I took this seminar, $5,600. Now, being there, it was a lot of participation and talking. You know, you introduce yourself, you get up in groups, you become a group representative, you present like different situations on how you would handle adversity, on your way of thinking during tough times, like how emotional stops you, the statements that you think you can't tolerate, you know, things like that, learning forgiveness and gratitude, all the things he normally teaches in a seminar. So there were different times when different people gave presentations. So a couple of times I gave a couple of presentations. I was the leader of my little 8-person group. So I had to present when we had contests and games. I was talking. So Sunday during the closing ceremony, I got approached by a woman. Her name was Diane. I'm gonna try to remember her last name. And she asked me, she said, Anthony Robbins would be interested in talking to you about a position. I think she didn't say Anthony Robbins personally. She just said that his foundation, his company, would be interested in talking to me about considering a position that he has coming open. I said, are you kidding me? She said, yes. I said, absolutely, I'm interested. I live here in the Atlanta area. She said, yeah, but we would interview you by phone. We'll talk to you a little bit afterwards. We'll interview you by phone. She gave me the process of what we'd have to go through before I'd actually go to Fiji, where he has his house, to begin the training. So apparently what he was thinking about doing was Anthony Robbins was developing this program called Train the Trainer. Now this is the mid-90s, and what's happening, there's a transformation for phone rooms. There's a lot of different things. Computers are just coming into play because they had gateway computers. A lot of things were, the world was changing. Technology and .com booms where everything was starting up online. So companies were needing people to train their employees. Well, Anthony Robbins, being the brilliant genius he is, started a program called Train the Trainer, where he was developing a team of people that he was going to present to companies that would help train their people who were going to train their people. And that's what I was a part of. So he interviewed me to be one of the elite eight trainers he had training people. Now I say this and I hope it doesn't get back to him, but I did get that job, but I believe that he brought me on as the token black person because it was me as the only person of color, and there was one female, whereas there were 6 other white males. So me and the female, her name was Mary, used to joke that we were the diversity in his hiring techniques. So I accepted the job. So I went through the interview process afterwards, was accepted, flew out to Los Angeles for the 3 different interviews that happened over 3 days, got accepted, got hired onto the job that paid almost $18,000 in base pay, plus all travel expenses, meaning that he paid for any expense that I'd go anywhere. Anywhere I went, he covered it. The way it worked was, it was 3 weeks on, 2 weeks off. So I would spend 3 weeks away from home and 2 weeks at home. The 3 weeks I was gone, I was doing multiple trainings so I could be in spot to spot to spot and would move. He had different programs that he offered, like communication access to power, where I would actually go in and train in corporations, a different group of people, or I would have a format that he'd set up at a hotel where different companies would bring their employees in. So I might even go to one company and train their group of trainers, or he would offer the train the trainer and different companies would bring them in and I'd cover their information, telling them techniques on training, how to establish training manuals, different, he had a set criteria or set classroom information that he had for each training session. So I would do different ones. It was an awesome job. Had me traveling to Turkey, to India, to Indonesia, training people, China. It was unbelievable. First class, flying everywhere, home for 2 weeks. I was an international star. I made over $100,000 a year. At that point in time, I did that for about 14, 15 months. At that point in time, I stopped taking on other people's information and ordering cards in their name and using them. I was making $100,000 a year. I had already stole so much money that I paid off my car. Because I wasn't home enough to drive, I didn't buy another car. I just upped my place and I actually was putting some money in the bank. I was doing very well and I was very proud of myself. Some of my 2 weeks off, I'd go visit Tampa to hang out with my family. I just had a ton of money and I think life was great. Of course, at that time I had multiple girlfriends because, hey, I'm the man. I'm quite a catch, especially as a brother. I had black and I was dating all races. It didn't matter. I had no choice because I loved them all. So, beautiful job, perfect. Idolized by every company I went to, offered permanent positions all the time, making a ton of money, A1 credit, living in a house in Atlanta, the life. What could mess that up? Me, just myself. So to start this job, I'm in high dollar suits and I had this thing about Land's End was the name of the company, and they're monogrammed on the shirt pocket and on the cuff shirts that they have where they would put your initials. There was something about seeing my initials on my cuff whenever I'm talking, I show it to people, or they'd see it on my shirt pocket that made me feel like some type of king. Nerdy as hell. That's nerdy. I mean, someone had to tell me that, but that meant everything to me. Those shirts back in the 90s were about $60, $70 per shirt, 100% silk wool cotton, comfortable as hell. Love them. The most perfect virgin white shirts you could ever see. I had some blue, But most of the time I wanted a clear, clean, virgin, whiter than this t-shirt, white shirt. Order them all the time. Rather than use part of the $100,000 that I was earning or the money I had in the bank that I had stolen before, I insisted upon using other people's credit cards. As I mentioned, I would get people's credit reports that had their card numbers. So when I went to order for Land's End, rather than call and maybe give my debit card number or my credit card number, I would give them somebody else's card number off the report. And I would order the shirts. Thousands of dollars worth of shirts. Probably, I had a closet full. I ordered suits, suitcases. Because I traveled, they'd have these, Land's End had this awesome, like freezing weather jacket that you could wear both, like you could turn it inside out and it was like this one gorgeous color. And then you flip it on another one, there's another gorgeous color, pockets everywhere, beautiful. I had this gorgeous umbrella with my monogram. Listen, I was stuck when almost $16,000 worth of product I bought from Land's End, covering about a year and a half that I worked for him. That's when I started ordering. I ordered from Land's End before, but I usually used my own money. But when I started working for him, for some stupid reason, I insisted upon using other people's money to order. So what happened was I'd order Land's End and have it sent directly to my house. So one night when I'm home, well, let me start here. So I'm living in the house, but it's in a HOA with a gated community, and a woman from the community came to me one day. I was out doing something, getting my mail or somewhere, I saw her, and she told me the police came by my house. She said, "Hey, you know the police were at your house the other night, don't you?" I said, "What?" She said, "Yeah." She said about a week and a half ago, the police were there and they were asking who lived there and like what was going on. Well, in my dumb mind, I'm thinking, well, I'm not really committing a crime. So I don't know why. I did crimes a long time ago, but right now I'm not committing a crime. So they probably had the wrong address. So they're not after me. That's my thinking. So like 3 days after, this is on my 2 weeks off, 3 days after she told me that, the police come knocking at my door. I open the door, they come barging in and they grab me, put me in cuffs, and the FBI starts going through my house. They take all of my shirts. So they say, "Okay, Mr. Allen, you're under arrest for mail fraud and ordering different things online from Land's End." So they bring me in, they're talking to the FBI about the shirts, and the FBI said they're not going to press charges. They decide they're not going to press charges on me, but the local police officer presses charges on me, take me down to the Cobb County Jail, which is in Georgia, in Marietta, Georgia, and they arrest me. So now I'm arrested for the first time in my life. I'm sitting in jail with 3 fraud charges because they only charged me for like 3 of the shirts or 3 different items totaling about $900 or $1,000. So I have to call like my girl, my mom. It becomes a travesty because I don't have a bond. When they arrest me, they give me no bond. So I have to have people come up. My family drives up from Florida when I call them. My mom comes in, gets my checkbook, writes the lawyer a check to come and get me out of jail. Now, I'm trying to get out rapidly because I'm supposed to take a trip like within like 6 days. So what I end up doing is on a 3-way call, which was brand new at the time, I call the job and tell them that I'm deathly ill and I need to postpone my trip for another week. Now, I've known that to happen. I've never done it before. I've known that to happen, that if you can't make your trip, then he arranges for other people to cover it. And what will happen is you'll just either get a longer trip off or your 2 weeks will move. because I've covered for other people myself. So I made that call and they covered my trip for a week. They covered my itinerary for a week. Robbins did. So it took me that much time to finally get out of jail because the lawyer had to come in and get me a bond. Once I got the bond, I made the bond and I got out. So I'm out of jail. So I think, okay, everything's cool. Nobody knows what's going on. So that following week I go off. It's supposed to be for like 3 weeks, but I only have the 1 week itinerary. So I'm calling saying that you guys didn't expand my itinerary to the other 2 weeks. How do you want to handle it? They're like, just cover your itinerary and then take I'm sorry, I work in 2 weeks. It's usually 3 weeks in, but I missed a week. So normally what they would do is just shift it. So those 2 weeks, they give me another week to cover, and then I have 2 weeks off. But so they only had me gone for those 2 weeks. They didn't make that other week up. So they told me just to go ahead and take the 2 weeks off after I did those 2 weeks. So I covered my itinerary, took the 2 weeks off. Now, scheduling comes in by locations and usually through your email. So when I take my week off, normally as soon as you get your first couple of days off, your new itinerary comes in. It normally comes in before you get your 2 weeks off because sometimes they might want you to start off early. But I got to my 2 weeks off and there was no itinerary. Matter of fact, I was day 3 into my 2 weeks and I hadn't gotten an itinerary. So I don't know, I'm like, what the hell's going on? So I called and asked and they're like, oh, well, we're putting it together, give us a moment. Well, about Friday of that first week in the morning, I get an email that Anthony wants to talk to me and they give me a number to call, Mr. Robbins himself. Someone that I only met during the trainings himself, he came in, but he generally never talked to us except for maybe in between some of the trainings to say we're doing a good job. You might get emails and comments from him, but never personally did he want to talk to us. That we were like his subordinates and we never really got to talk to him. Although the interactions we did have with him, the man is absolutely incredible. I have nothing but praises for him. He's an awesome human being. So he called me, he wanted to speak to me and I get him on the phone. I have to call him. I call and he answers. He's ecstatic to hear from me. He's like, oh, Zack, Isaac, how you doing, buddy? I said, I'm doing great. He says, listen, he starts talking to me. He goes, let me tell you, first of all, let me start off by saying how dynamic you are as a presenter. He says, if I go through some of the reviews, because every time you train, you leave them notes to ask how the training was. What did you think? Did you learn what you needed to learn? And how was the trainer? So he started going, as I go through the notes about your training, people find you to be very natural and easy to get along with, someone that they can talk to with a great sense of humor. He says your projection, your diction, your attitude is positive. He goes, never, ever have anyone else gotten all the rave reviews. He said, you're the only one I've ever had that hasn't even had a negative or a complaint about him. And he goes, that says a lot about how you are as an employee and how you treat others. He goes, you've learned a lot and you've got a long way to go. He goes, now I understand that you've had a couple of legal situations come up. I said, yeah, those are pending, and I'll probably be able to get them resolved positively. He said, that'd be fantastic. Because he goes, those type of black marks on your record could leave a blemish and hurt you. He says, listen, there is a time when opportunities need to be sought after, or better opportunities need to be sought after, and sometimes a certain job can hold someone back from a better chance that's just there waiting for them. He says, listen, as a trainer, I know for a fact that you've gotten other offers. And I know for a fact that you've gotten other offers that probably pay more money. He goes, what I want to do is I want to give you the chance to take advantage of those offers. He says, I know of two, this company and this company have told me themselves they'd like to have you. He says, I think this is the time for you to take a closer look at some of those better offers so you get a chance to make more money. He says, the dynamic job you did for me probably has a limit. He goes, with those other offers, you probably have popped the roof off of them, and you have a chance to rise to a level you've never risen to in your life. He goes, as a matter of fact, I'm jealous of the opportunities that are in front of you right now to take your life to that next level. He says that little bump in the road should be nothing but a bump right now. He said, you leave that bump behind you and you move forward and you elevate to your best self and you get you a job that's going to take you to the levels that you deserve to be at. Because I see you as a millionaire. You are a success story in the making right now. I said, thank you. I appreciate that. But then I processed it. I said, wait a minute. You're telling me to take advantage of other opportunities? Yes. Yes. I'm tired of holding you back from your future that you have waiting. I said, are you letting me go? He goes, no. I'm giving you the chance to move on. I'm making you move on. I'm actually contributing to your success, which is letting me go. He fired me in the most motivational way possible. Because as he's talking, of course, I can't even do the half the job he did. As he's talking, I'm getting more excited about opportunities and realizing that I just lost this one. Well, those other opportunities he spoke of really weren't there. Because once I hung up with him with no longer having my job, the other opportunities I called, and apparently they knew about my arrest as well, and were told not to mess with me. So I didn't get those other opportunities. Matter of fact, I ended up going back to work for the paper company from making $118,000 back down to 40 or 50. That began the wake of my woes. And needless to say, because of that transition and how I got used to living, of course I started back listening to the tapes and pulling other people's credit in order to keep up or order to maintain the lifestyle that I had started. I don't have any valid reason of why I would risk everything I had going on in life. After scamming and reaching a plateau, I don't have a good reason of why I was dumb enough to continue to commit crimes. In fact, I think about it now, and that is my biggest regret of life, because I realized that for some reason my inner mind or my inner thinking insisted on being on the downward spiral of life and taking risks that didn't need to be taken. The 15, 16,000 in shirts that the FBI, because I got a report of what was confiscated, and it was like $16,000 worth of shirts that they took, was only maybe 1/8 of the money I had in the bank. It was definitely like maybe less than 10% of what I was being paid per year. And my house was nearly paid off because I had taken so much money. But yet I insisted on putting everything at risk by doing that. It just seems crazy to me. It doesn't make sense. But as you follow my story, you'll realize that I do a lot of things that don't make sense or didn't make sense. It's only now that I'm in my 50s that I start realizing how my decisions alone or my greed or my ignorance is what kind of led to the downturns of my life. It's the reason why elderly people, or once when I was in jail, I talked to young people like, hey, you got to make a decision to turn this boat around. Because my decision to turn the boat around came in my 50s. I wish I could make them realize that in their 20s, because I would give anything to go back and redo that decision in my life. Thank you guys again for listening to that story. Thank you for continuing to follow my stories and subscribe to my channel by hitting that button below. And please leave me a comment and let me know what you think, because there's a lot more to come, because I haven't got my whole story done yet before I start bringing in some really special people I've met. And thank you for your support and Cash App. I appreciate every one of you guys and all my fans. I want to hear from you because, like I said, this is the beginning of the journey. We're going to keep going. Thanks.